Have you ever seen a miracle? A real miracle? Right in front of your eyes kind of miracle. The kind that you can report to other persons and say, my eyes have beheld the glory of the coming of the Lord. The transformation of a person. Have you ever seen that kind of a miracle? If you haven't, I want to introduce you to a miracle. But first, I'm not sure that Lenore knows that I have in my hand a copy of the requests of 12 people at a mastermind meeting that was held on Easter Saturday, the 21st of March in 1984, 3 years ago. Lenore Scott was at that meeting, and her request was to be free of the ego and negative responses and to become the best inventory teacher in America. I want to present to you one of nature's greatest miracles. Lenore Scott.
After an introduction like that this afternoon, this sweet little lady came up to me. She wanted to know what I had done. She was so serious. It touched my heart. I think she thought I walked in water, rose from the dead, which Jack said that was probably it, Lenore. You should have said yes right there. The dead place inside myself to really come alive and start living my life and functioning in life. And as I sit there, you overwhelm me. You know, I thought last week was a dream, and I come back, and here you are again. And I look and I think, you make a statement about yourself by being here. And that is that you are really looking to do something with your life. And I look at you, and I'll tell you, you look pretty good to me. You look like you're doing some things already, and most people out there would say, what do you want to go sit in church on a Wednesday night for? You're okay. But you know, don't you? You know there's more. There's more beyond what you've already experienced in your life. And all I can say is this is it. This is it. It finally arrived. It's here. This is the day that you called sometime. This is the day you referred to as when. And this is the day you named later on. And this is the day that you'll get around to. This is the day your ship will come in. And this is the day you were looking forward to. This is the day that all your yesterdays were meant to be. This is the first day of the rest of your life. And this is the day you begin a new life. This is the day. As we go along the path we started last week to really taking a look at who we are. We started slowly. We said last week that we are a person who, although we have these adult bodies, sometimes act like a child. We have child responses and adult responses. We have child and adult behaviors that go on in us. Well, I believe it was Huxley that said, the rung of the ladder was never meant to rest upon, but only to hold a man's foot long enough to put the other up. Well, we started on the first rung of that ladder. Today, we're going to step up. We're going to take a look at ourselves again. And this time, we're going to expand on the idea of there being more than just one of us operating. The one of us that we're the most familiar with is our personality. Our personality has been developing since the day we were born. It's made up of everything that we have ever been told about ourselves. Cute, pretty, homely, sad, lazy. All the things you were ever told. You were like a sponge and you just soaked them up, took them all in. Our personality is that part of us that can't ever make up its mind. It's the part of us that gets depressed, that one day feels great and the next day you're down in the pits and you don't know why. The personality has opinions about everything, knows something about everything, whether it does or not. The personality of us is very judgmental, critical, has a hard time forgiving those persons for what they said back then and what they did back then. The personality can get very negative, angry, blaming. It can judge and criticize, and it could really manipulate to make things work out in its favor. It's cunning. The personality is made up, sure, of some positive too along the way, but this class isn't to show us what's positive as much as it is to first point out what is not positive. Because in seeing that and eliminating that, we will get to what is really our positive strength in us. Personality, on the one hand, we know, we see it in each other, don't we? Often we see it easier in each other than we could see it in ourselves. Well, if I came in and I said we're going to do an inventory and we're going to look at our negative aspects of our personality, and this is it, manipulation, control, self-pity, the victim syndrome, and I threw all this at you, and there you would sit. Your personality would be scared to death to look at that. Because with our personality, we would be afraid we have to fix that. Personality does not know solution. It only knows the problem. So how could you ask your personality to fix your personality? Therefore, let's look at something else. Let's look at the other part of us. The part that we hope to experience, we want to have, and yet somehow we just can't seem to keep it going all the time. We touch on it. We experience it from time to time. Those great moments of love that you have felt for another person. That's from our individuality, not our personality. Those great moments of self-pride when we have done something and we feel so good about our achievement that we threw ourselves into this project and did it so well. That feeling of self-love comes from our individuality. Those moments when we could look that person in the eye, the one who said the thing that hurt so bad, and we could say, it's okay, I understand. And even if I don't, I forgive. But I do more than forgive, I forget. You know, have you ever gone around saying, I forgive, I don't care, I'll never forget. But I forgive. That's not forgiveness. That's our personality that doesn't want to forget, while it uses the words, I forgive. Personality goes to church is very pious and holy, but it never experiences God. Individuality is God, the God in me. Most people, when you talk about individuality, they're confused. They don't really understand that there is this individuality already in us. And I remember when I came to this church many years ago, we were in the old church, and I sat just like you are, and I listened to a meditation. And Jack said, God in me. And my hand was searching. My eyes were closed, but I wanted to feel that God in me. And I heard, put your hand down. It's very easy to see every one of you out there. And I was trying so hard with my physical senses, with my personality, to experience a God in me. And so the more that we got into this idea of personality, individuality, I thought, why is it so difficult? A concept for people to catch on to. Why is it? And I was reminded of an ancient parable that was told, and it was the gods that were sitting around and talking with each other. And the gods were saying, what shall we do with this Godhead to keep it away from the human beings, the human people? Where can we put it so they'll never find it? And one said, I know, put it on the highest mountain. Man will never find it there. And the other god said, no, someday man will climb that highest mountain and they'll find it. So another said, okay, I'll tell you what, let's put it down in the deepest waters, in the deepest ocean. Man will never go there. And another god said, oh, yes, they will. Eventually, they will go to the deepest depths of the water, and they will find it. And the God of wisdom said, I know. Let's put it deep within man. He will never think of looking for it there. And so here we are. And most of the world will never think to look for it there. But that's where it is. God in me. When we're in our small groups, in our workshops, it's a little different. We've got big chalkboards, and I can really, draw some pictures and accentuate what I want to say. And one thing I will do is say, what does God mean to you? When you hear the word God, what are the pictures that come to your mind? What have you been told about God? What is your belief system about this God? If there is this power in me that is so great, it can do all the things for me that I can't do for myself, what do I really believe about God? And I always get just about the same answers. God is loving. God is kind. God is gentle. God is good. We've heard those things. We've been told. We read these things, and it's true. But then on the other hand, somebody will say, God was awesome. He was far away. He was so unavailable. I never felt like he was there for me. He was off in this place called heaven. And somebody else will say, I was so afraid of the stories about hell that it made me afraid of God. And another one will say, well, it was God the Father, but my father used to beat me. And when I connect those two words, it's not comfortable for me to say God, my Father. And another will say, sounds like male chauvinism to me, this he God, man God all the time. And so you see how all of these things have been said. And again, we are like this sponge that soaks this all up, takes it all in. Very little discrimination. Or we think we do, and yet inside of us, all of these thoughts are there about what is God. And one man in my class said to me, he said, Lenore, he said, it's not so much God. It was the people who taught me about God. He said, and I just kind of turned off to the whole thing. So it wasn't really God, but it was. And so from all of the things that we will talk about and say, the good and the bad that we have heard, the loving and the unloving, the punishing, the poverty. You know, if you were poor in some religions, you got to heaven faster. And now you're going to believe that God is going to bring you riches? He'd rather have you poor. Do you see the conflicting information we got? And so when somebody comes along and say, there is this power in you that can do all the things that you can't do, you know where we come from? We come from the confusion of all the things that we're told. And when we come from our confusion, how can we really believe there is a power in us that is greater than our personality? That with us can overcome any of our defects of character? And yet, that is our salvation. If we really want to believe our life can change, we have to believe that there's more to life than just us. That there is someone responsive, something responsive to us in our life. And as you can imagine, I think about this class a lot. I go to bed, I think about it. I wake up, I'm thinking about it. And so this morning as I woke up, you know, I was anticipating being here and I was thinking about it. And we live on the 13th floor of an apartment building and we have all windows across the top of the bedroom and we catch the sunrise. And as I laid there, it was a cloudy morning, but that didn't stop the big orange ball in the sky from coming up and lighting the sky. And I looked at that and I thought, you know, I never worry whether it's going to come up tomorrow morning. I never think about it. With me, that's a certainty. It just does. It always has. I don't worry about it. Don't concern myself at all. And I think I have great faith in the sun coming up. It's never let me down. And I thought, faith, what is faith but a choice? You can't study faith. You study a religion. You study theology. You study the ways people have, the rules they had of worshiping. You don't study faith. You choose it. You know, every day of our lives, all day long, we choose and choose and choose and choose how we're going to feel, what we're going to say, what we're going to do. And faith is a choice. I chose to believe that the sun's going to come up every morning, go down right there every evening. Beautiful sunsets right out that window. And so with that same faith, it occurred to me that I made a decision one day that of myself, with my personality, I couldn't change my life. In fact, living was pretty scary. And so I made a choice, a conscious choice. And the more I believed it, the greater my belief got. The more I believed in this power in me, the more this power in me did for me. And that's how it works. It's a choice you make. And you might be thinking, okay, you have this choice. If I know it's there, why? Why can't I tap into it more? Why can't I experience it more? And remember, I told you I can't use a chalkboard there. Just because of the way you're seated and so many of you couldn't see it. So I thought of another way. You know, Jesus taught with stories, and I really see why. You get a picture in your mind very vividly of something, and it makes a much more lasting impression. And I thought about a jar of honey. Honey's sweet. It's smooth and it feels good going down. And once you've gotten a taste of it, there are times you want some more of it. And when you want some, what do? You get it and you remove the cover because there is this container that holds what you want, and you can't get in without removing the cover. Except that, you know, you can't always get the cover off. And so what do? You become creative. and you find something. Have you done that? Loosen the lid and take off the cover. And sometimes it works. And sometimes it doesn't. And so what do? Some people quit. Are you a quitter? If you really want it, you don't quit. You'll find something. You'll get it. And if that doesn't work, you still won't quit. You'll turn on the hot water. But you'll get that cover off, won't you? One way or the other, you'll get it off. In The Road Less Traveled, the reason I love that book, you know what he was bold enough to say? Most people on this earth don't travel a spiritual path because they're lazy. That's it. I have been lazy in many areas of my life, and I've had to give myself a push, and thank God for friends who have helped and given me a push when I've needed it. Do you put it back, or do you keep trying until you get what you want? Okay, your source, your higher power is in you, but do you know that we all wear a cover? And in order to get into our source, to have it work on our life, we have to remove the cover. And it's full. It's full of all of the negative attitudes we have learned. It's full of negative responses and negative behaviors. That is what personal inventory is all about. It's about looking at your cover. It'll be different for all of you. Every one of you have had your own experience in life with the people you lived with, the schools you went to, the neighborhoods, the friends, the jobs. Everything was exclusively designed for you to work through whatever it is in life you need to work through to get to the point where you look for the something more. It brought you to this point. Life is a playground. Life is a schoolhouse where we learn lessons. We've all had our experiences, and I know some of them have been very hard and very hurtful. But they brought you to the place where you're looking for more in your life. Next week, we are going to get right into character defects. And your character defects, my character defects, can be labeled as manipulation, worry, perfectionism, false pride, resentments, blaming, rejection of ourselves, rejection of other people, dishonesty, guilt, fear, anger. We'll look at some of those things in our life and how they're affecting our life. And you know, we sometimes fool ourselves. Again, it's easier to see somebody else sometimes than ourselves. So we'll talk about when we're experiencing this, what are some of the reactions in life that we're having that are causing us to fail, so that we can learn to really get into our own covers. You know, there's not another person in life that you can change. Have you tried it? Doesn't work. So let's make a pact. We're not going to take anybody else's inventory when we talk about these things. We're only going to look at ourselves and see what it is about us that needs to change. Today, I would like to talk about a very pressing problem for all of us. It's fear. That is a negative response that is crippling. And I don't think there's any person that doesn't have it in some area of their life. See, we deal with our negative responses in life, and you know, we are like bulldozers, some of us, and we'll tackle this problem only to have it pop up somewhere else or somewhere else or somewhere else, because we're not looking at the fact that fear is a negative emotion. And you have to tackle the emotion as well as the outer incident in your life. You know, there is the part that God plays, but there's a part that we play. Identify the fear and do the thing we're afraid to do. You know, that fear is like a big boogeyman in the night. It gets so big. Our personalities have made fear bigger than we are. But if we really start to believe in our individuality gets big and the fear gets small. So we will look for the fears and tackle them in our lives. Walk through the fear. The only way to get rid of a fear is to walk through it, not around it. And at the same time, we will be believing that there is a power who can take away our fear. But we can't sit and wait for the power to work for us. When we go into action, the power works with us. That's the way it is. We must go into action because we are beings of choice. We have choices. And we have to show what our choice is, and then the power comes. I can remember years ago, first time I was going to drive on the freeway. And I went down the ramp, and I looked. There were all these cars. And they didn't look like they were going to let me in. So I went up on the grass. And I stopped. And somebody else had to take the wheel because I was afraid to merge. I was afraid nobody would let me in. Well, many years later, I was taking my 3 sons to the Children's Museum in Detroit. And I was determined. I was so tired of getting lost. I was so tired of being afraid to go or asking somebody to come with me to show me the way. So I got in the car with these 3 fellows, and we were going to the museum, and I was taking the freeway, and I merged. And I barreled right into traffic. And then I went too far, and I got lost. So I drove around and finally found it, and the next Saturday, I got back in that car, and I merged. And I was so cautious to not go too far, I got off too soon. And I drove around some more. But the next week, I got back in that car, I merged, and I got off in the right place. I kept doing it and doing it and doing it. I can remember going places, and my oldest son used to say, "Oh, she did it again." And sometimes I would pretend that I made this turn purposely. It was embarrassing. But do you get the idea when our personality tries to fix us? I used to be tired all the time. I was exhausted from this life I was living of constantly push and push and push and make myself do things because I thought I had to do it myself. And then not long ago, I met a young man in his early 20s, handsome, a body on him that, and he was so impressive because I watched him as he tied his shoe, zippered the zipper on his jacket, buttoned his buttons, and I was amazed as I watched him do it with one hand because he was missing the other arm. And nobody in our group would have thought to walk up and say, "Here, let me do that for you." His air about him was, "I can do anything. I can handle it myself. I don't need anybody." And we stood back and we watched in awe. He is a champion downhill skier. He wins medals for the disabled races. Phenomenal person. What happened was, 5-6 years ago, he was water skiing on a skidoo, and a motorboat went zipping by, didn't see him apparently, never stopped. But the motor took off his arm. He was determined to live his life and show everybody that he can do it. But in the night, in those times that we all have, his heart used to cry out, and he looked for the inner peace. He looked for the freedom, for the fears that he wouldn't talk about, and he turned to drugs. There is no peace in drugs. There is no peace in alcohol, in pills. That's not where it is. He had not known there was more to him than his personality, but his circumstances backed him into a corner, and he found himself a recovery program. A 12-step program, like the 12-step program I told you we are involved in here. Admitting of ourselves we can't do it. Of our personality, we're helpless. admitting that there is a power greater within us that can do the things through us that we can't do for ourselves. And that was where he was when I last saw him. In the process of hearing the things you're hearing, that there is more to you than meets the eye. Let go. Trust. Have faith. So that the power could work through him and he would not have to fight his way through life and not cry in the night. When I saw him sob, his body was just racking with tears and sobs. We do not have to be like that. We don't have to have that experience. I think of Marianne Miller, and I can't ever speak of fear without talking about her. Marianne lived in prison. For many years she was in prison. You know that prison we talked about that we create? The prison where we're so afraid that we can't move out of our comfort zone. And her comfort zone was her home with her 3 little girls. And she sat and played dolls. She didn't go out. She didn't have friends. Her husband did the shopping. And she went to many, many doctors and spent thousands of dollars, and they gave her a label. Agoraphobic. Well, she knew she was afraid. Where was the solution? Our personality cannot give us a solution. But one day she was watching television with her daughter, and she heard a man on a talk show, and he was talking about this power that every one of us have within us to help us to do the things we can't do for ourselves, and all we need to do is choose to believe that we have it. And you can overcome your problems. And she made a phone call. Don't you know the longing that was in her heart to make her pick up the phone and call the station to find out who this person was? And she showed up on a Sunday out here in the hall. And she spoke to Jack. And she said, "Do you really mean that? Is there really hope for me?" And he said, "I believe it. Do you believe it?" And she said, "I can't. It's been so long." And he said, "Then you do something for me. You keep coming back here and let me believe it for you until you are ready to believe it for yourself." And she did. She came back and used to sit way off in the corner. And after a period of time, she sat in the middle. And after a longer period of time, she sat right there. And one Sunday, Jack asked her to step up here on the platform. Somebody who couldn't leave the house? That's fear. But she learned to believe. And here she was. And do you know where she was last night? She was celebrating with her AIM group. See, she started a recovery program, a support group for agoraphobics, for people like herself, because now that she has found the answer in her life, she has this desire to share, to give to others. That's what overcoming is. It's believing. It's materializing the things you're working on, and then it's reaching out to help somebody else on the path, to help somebody else who's looking for answers. And I really believe you're here because you're looking for answers in your life. Let's look at some things about fear. Each one of you, for yourselves, write down, what is the thing you fear? What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word fear? What is your fear? Are you afraid just of living in general? Or can you be more specific? Let's go through some examples, and perhaps that'll help you to get your mind working in that way. Let's talk about fear of authorities. Is that not a big one? Do most people not struggle with fear of authority figures? The personality is afraid of another person's personality. Individuality is equal to all persons. There is no better or worse. We're equal. But in our personality, we see people with all kind of distorted pictures in our mind. And it probably came from experiences you had. You know, for every one experience you remember in your life, there are dozens that have been buried away that you will never recall. You don't need to recall them all. Don't feel you can't do a good inventory if you can't recall them. What you're dealing with is what is. The way recalling things will help you is if you give yourself a picture to work with, you can overcome by using your picture. For instance, I was in the 4th grade and I had a brother a year above me in school, and I found a wallet on the playground, and I was sure it belonged to one of his friends. And so at lunchtime, I knocked on the door of the classroom, and there was so much noise with people taking their boots and coats and everything off, they didn't hear me knocking. So I knocked, and nobody answered, so I walked in. And I looked around, and everybody was scurrying about. And then they sat down, and I still stood there in the back of the room, and nobody acknowledged me. So I walked up to the front of the room. I stood there for a while, and I looked over, and the nun was standing there, but she didn't say anything. So I picked up the wallet, and I said, "Did anybody drop this on the playground?" And all of a sudden, a big voice boomed. "Who do you think you are taking over my classroom?" And I looked, and she looked ominous to me in her black robe. And she said, "Now you leave this room and you do it the right way." If I knew the right way, believe me, I would have done it. So I walked out, and I wanted to run. I no more wanted to go back in that room, but I knew I better. She knew which homeroom I was in. And so I tapped so lightly on that door, and I tapped, and they let me in, and she said, "Come to the front," and I went to the front, and she said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Somebody lost a wallet," and she said, "Well, ask them." Do you know, I was in my 30s, and I was well into working this program of looking at myself. What more could I see? And one day I saw her. I saw that little girl. She was standing at her boss's office door. Sad. Should I walk in or shouldn't I? Maybe he's too busy for me, but I need an answer. I'll tiptoe over there so I don't disturb him. And he just kept writing. And I stood there thinking, I hope he looks up. Maybe he doesn't know I'm here. Should I speak? Should I wait? Should I leave? And it hit me. That was not the mature woman. That was still a little girl who learned to respond with fear, not from one incident, from many things that happened. But if I could relate to that one, and if I could see in my mind how bad it looked for an adult to be functioning as a child, I was going to fix that real quick. Where did your fears of authority come from? Look at that. Get a picture of it so you can put a stop to it. You can't fix what you don't see, what you don't admit to. Let's look at fear of rejection. Do you have a fear of not being accepted, of not being approved? Do you walk around and you're very submissive and you're a people pleaser and, a little goody-goody? Because you don't want to be rejected. Our character defects make us act in strange ways. Look at those ways that you are performing in life, on the job, in your personal relationships. What can you change? You can change anything by changing your pictures of how it should be. You can learn to function in adult, healthy ways. Do you become a hero, tough guy? I can take it, dish it out, I'll show you. And inside you're cringing? When we come from our individuality, we don't play all the roles. We just are. We just perform. If we make a mistake, okay, so let's correct. We take the trauma out of living. Do you have a fear of loving? Are you afraid of being abused or manipulated, cheated? You know what we sometimes do? We call it, well, I'm waiting for the ideal person. And we wait, and we wait, and we wait, because there is no ideal person. What it really is our fear that is holding us back. So listen, or a career, I want a career. I'm too busy for a relationship, I want a career. It's okay if you really do, but is that really what you want? Ask yourself. Because if you don't, you can change it. Do you have a fear of not being loved? If you have a fear of not being loved, oh, can you be insecure, wrapped up in self-doubt, self-pity? You can get very jealous, envious, very possessive. What are your fears? Take an honest look. Look as you've never looked at yourself before. When you do that, you become strong. Strong from the right place. Have you been hurt in life? Have you really had some things that just knocked you over? You thought you could never stand up again? Max Cleland was a guest speaker here many years ago, and he wrote a book, Strong at the Broken Places. And he said, life breaks many of us, but then we become strong at the broken places. You can overcome anything in your life. And don't be afraid to look at your shortcomings, because do you know the things that you were most deprived of in your childhood? The hurts that were your greatest. Do you know that when you turn this around, you can develop them into your greatest strengths? My fear of travel, I have a bag half packed all the time. Ask him. He's sitting right there. I get teased about it all the time. I'll get on a plane, a car, a boat. It doesn't matter. I'm ready to go. I don't have any fear of traveling or getting lost. I always know I can find my way back, or somebody else will help me to find it back. My fear was in my mind. Whatever that fear is, it's in your mind, and it's gotten so big. Let's pull it in and bring it to size, and let's let our individuality, our strength, make us winners in every area of our life. Do you fear failure? You know, if you fear failure, you never go into action. You know, you think better don't do anything than do it and fail. Well, that's not true. Life is so short. Much too short to be sitting and wringing your hands afraid of failing. I remember an art teacher that said to me one time, he said, most people, they're trying to get all the lines out of their face. He said, me, I love lines. I love lines. He said, it's character, it's a life that's richly lived, because every line tells a story. He said, I look for the person with the most lines, and I want to get to know them. They have a story to tell. It's the same thing with going into action. Do it, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. Boy, will you have an exciting life. If you fall over, so what? Get back up and keep going. What's so wrong with failure? It's not the failure. It's the not getting up and trying again. Do you have a fear of taking action, of making a decision? Right now, make a decision that you are going to do a thorough inventory of the fears in your life this week. Because next week when you come back, we're going to really get into our covers, and we're going to explore all the facets of it to see what's holding you back, to see what you can do to change your life. And before parting, I would like to say that you have no idea of the magnificence within you. Very much like the old violin. 'Twas battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to waste much time on the old violin. But he held it up with a smile. "What am I biddin', good folks?" he cried. "Who'll start the biddin' for me? $1, $1? Then 2, only 2. $3 once, $3 twice, going for $3, but no. Far from the room, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the bow. Then wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening and the loosening strings, he played a melody pure and sweet as a caroling angel sings. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and low, said, "What am I bid for the old violin?" And he held it up with the bow. $1,000? Who'll make it 2? $2,000? Who'll make it 3? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, and going and gone, said he. The people cheered, but some of them cried, "We don't understand. What changed its worth?" Swift came the reply, the touch of the master's hand. And many a man, with life out of tune, battered and scarred with sin, it auctioned cheap to the thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He's going once, going twice. He's going and almost gone. But the master comes, and the foolish crowd can never quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that is wrought by the touch of the master's hand.
Thank you, Lenore. Thank you. You know, it's true. It really is true that Lenore keeps her bags packed and ready to travel. And just every week or so, I ask where Lenore is, and she's in Montreal or some other place around the country. And I can distinctly remember, when Lenore, if she traveled from here to 10 Mile and Hoover, would have a tough time finding her way back. Is that true or false?
It's true. Coming back from Belle Isle many years ago, I was headed toward Ohio.
And that was not just one time. That was every time that she went somewhere. I told you that you would see a miracle, and you are. She has not told you the story of her life, and in this lesson, this series will not have the chance to do so, but I want you to know that everything that Lenore talks about is something that she has practiced, and be sure and be here next week, because she's going to be talking about really going into action to do something about the things that you are discovering about yourself. And tonight, Lenore, I was in the back of the room, and I don't think you're aware of how many people are writing and taking notes and writing down things. This is that special moment when each one of us has the chance to place a value